May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord. Amen. Just want everyone to take a deep breath. No one walked out during the sermon at the early service. So, the first person I knew to get an abortion was my supervisor at my work-study job in college. She was in her 30s, married, and expecting her first child, and they were so excited. It was a girl, and she was petite, so she started showing early, and we were excited and going to throw a baby shower for her before the end of the semester. And then at about 5 months, she stopped showing up to work. And about a week later, her supervisor shared with us, with her permission, what had happened. They had gotten test results from a scan that showed that their daughter's brain was not developing, and that if she went to term, which she likely would, that the child would not survive beyond a few weeks attached to various machines. And so they had an option to carry the child for several months to term, or to induce labor and have the child then. And they decided to induce labor, and at 23 weeks, she gave birth to her daughter, who she was able to hold for a few hours before she died. In Texas, as of this week, her husband could be sued for being part of that choice, for driving her to the hospital, for paying for it, the doctors and nurses who cared for her. What sounds like a medical choice amidst a terrible tragedy is technically an abortion. And at that time, and I believe still today, Catholic hospitals would not have induced labor, and they would have instructed her to carry the child to term. 17 weeks of anticipating the death of the child inside her. The Indiana House Speaker commented this week that they would watch the legislation in Texas closely in hopes of passing similar legislation here. I have zero desire to preach about abortion today. I'd rather not think about it at all. The Episcopal Church passed its first statement in the 60s, they refined it in the 70s, and they haven't touched it since. 50 years of sticking with the teaching that has basically summed up that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. We never talked about it, the ethics of it in the seminary, or dealt with the medical advances that have changed how early a child can live outside the womb, and the knowledge about various conditions that may influence a person's choice and ethics of that. I've never preached on it before. It most frequently comes up in confirmation classes, when someone inevitably asks, what is the church's position on this? And it breaks my heart to think of all the babies that aren't born, and the many, many couples I've walked with fertility issues who desperately want them. And it breaks my heart to think of what desperate women and men did before abortion was safe and accessible. It is complicated and uncomfortable to weigh into the circumstances and details of that, and I'd rather not think about it. And I imagine many of you would rather not either. I have 2 other great sermons on this gospel text, one from 2015 and one from 2018. And it was my intention this Sunday to preach one of them. It was a holiday weekend, you guys. And 2 things changed that. 2 weeks ago, I met with our lay preachers group for this year. That's a group of people, of congregants that I've asked to come together to preach 2 sermons each over the course of the year. And I was doing a training on how to approach writing a sermon. And we looked at this text. And the verse that stood out for me was in the second story of healing, where Jesus puts his fingers into his ears and he spat and touched his tongue. Jesus got really close to the guy in a really uncomfortable way. He didn't zap him from across the crowd. He didn't lay his hands gently on his lips or on his forehead. He didn't anoint him with oil and say a prayer. He stuck his fingers in his ears and spat and touched his tongue. He got up close and personal. And that verse kept tugging at me, but I was resisting it because I was going to reuse a sermon. And then this week, when the Supreme Court did not interfere with the Texas law going into effect, I was 100% positive I would not be preaching on it today. Abortion isn't just a political hot button, which I try to avoid from the pulpit when it's hot, and it's hot right now. It's also extremely emotional, as it brings up pain around infertility and miscarriages and life lost before it's begun. And for those who have had abortions or walked beside someone who has, they are not fond memories. My own thinking on abortion is not black and white. It can't be summed up by pro-life or pro-choice. And I have legal opinions on this law and the precedent it sets. And none of that pertains to proclaiming the gospel this morning, which is what my job is here from this pulpit. But this verse from the gospel text that happened to be assigned this Sunday, this verse that kept holding and cooking at me for 2 weeks, this verse speaks to the spiritual problem that this law illuminates. It is not unique to the law, but it reveals it. And I remember my former college supervisor, and I remember the other people I've known over the years who have struggled with this choice. And this verse from this gospel invited me, like it invites you, to get uncomfortably close if we want to be part of healing. Jesus put his fingers into his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. Jesus doesn't heal from a distance. Jesus doesn't heal without getting up close and personal, and sometimes that's really uncomfortable. Fingers and ears and spit on the tongue. The spiritual problem of this law is it tries to heal the problem of abortion from a distance. It stands as far away from the person and their circumstances as possible. The law doesn't care about the story or the struggle. It doesn't care if the teenager was raped and was too traumatized to tell her parents, or if the married couple is stretched to its absolute limit. It doesn't care if the woman is abused. It doesn't care if the baby's brain is not developing. Laws, by their very nature, aren't personal. They keep a distance. If the pain and problem of abortion is to be healed, if our church is to stand a lot behind what it believes, that abortions should be rare and they are not, then keeping a distance is not a faithful route to healing. Jesus gets up close and personal when he wants to be part of someone's healing. He sticks his hand in the ears and spits on his fingers and touches their tongue. He doesn't heal without getting intimately involved. The persistent problems of the world, the persistent problems of individual human lives can't be healed from a distance. The more we try to rely on healing by controlling people's choices or by anonymizing their struggles, the further we get from the way of healing that Jesus taught. If we want to be part of healing, we have to get close and involved with the things we want to heal. We have to touch, offer our time, get educated about the details. We have to get dirty in the complexity of people's lives and have to sit with it. And it's not so black and white up close. It gets a lot grayer and a lot more uncomfortable. But if we can linger through the discomfort, we can be open to the signs of healing that appear. The closer we get, the more we can create options, changes, programs, even laws that really do bring about healing. On an individual level, it's impossible to do that with everything. The world is too broken to get up close and personal with every issue, every person in need of healing. But that shouldn't keep us from remembering that everything is more complex than it seems. And any attempt to bring about good in the world better be ready to get their hands involved in that process. Because as Jesus reminds us, the further away we stand, the further away from the brokenness and the healing we are. Amen.